Submission Radio here ahead of UFC 244, brought to you live in Sashi with the boss man himself, Dana White, ahead of one of the biggest events of the year. Dana, I mean, this thing is just absolutely unprecedented. Madison Square Garden. Tell us, how's it trending to look in terms of the biggest event of the year, possibly of all time? Yeah.
So I thought that this was going to be one or two this year. It's off the charts, number one. Yeah. As we get closer to the fight, I mean, just forget the buzz, the energy, and everything else, but for ESPN right now, this thing's trending off the charts for them. To be not the biggest event of the year, the biggest event we've ever done with ESPN.
That's crazy. I mean, you just unveiled the BMF title. It looks fantastic. How much of a sort of, I guess, help has it been having The Rock sort of on board? And how did this all come together? Because it sort of started with, a little tweet, and now all of a sudden he's become such a massive part of this event as well.
Yeah, it definitely doesn't hurt when The Rock wants to, be a part of something. So he's actually having his own press conference here today to announce something special to the UFC. He wanted to basically tell this to the UFC fans, the MMA fans first, before anybody else. So pretty cool.
Yeah, we're very excited about that. Now, speaking of belts, a lot of questions around what's next for Israel Adesanya. We saw Paulo Costa was hurt. Can't really be back until April. We saw Yoel Romero.
He's not back in April, okay? Listen, I love the fact that he wants to come back before April. He's not a doctor. His manager isn't the doctor. The reality is he can start training again in April. Not that he can come back. He can start training again in April. So he's out for a minute. And, while we're speaking of badasses, Israel Adesanya says, everybody thinks Yoel Romero is so tough. I want Yoel Romero. I respect that so much. So we have some ideas. We're playing with some things right now. We'll have an announcement soon.
I guess a lot of people are wondering if Darren Till is able to beat Calvin Gastelum. Till versus Adesanya could be a stadium show, both in Australia, New Zealand, or back in the UK. Would that be a possibility if that goes down on the weekend?
That fight's big in the US too. So that fight's big anywhere. I don't know. We're still playing with some ideas.
We obviously want to ask you about some Aussies, Alex Volkanovski at 245, but obviously Robert Whittaker, the former champion, got beaten by Israel. He cancelled his speaking tour, and it seems like he's got a fight in the mix. When can we see him back, and, who could it possibly be? Maybe, in Liverpool, main eventing, something like that?
Yeah, he wants to turn around quick and fight again, and we'll make some announcements soon for that, too.
Speaking of Alex Volkanovski, obviously he takes on Max Holloway at UFC 245. It's a big deal over in Australia. People are excited to see what happens, but a lot of rumors about the fact that if Alex does beat Max, it's likely there would be an immediate rematch. Do you think that would be a scenario if Alex becomes champion? Would Max get an immediate rematch because he's such a dominant champion, or do you believe the division moves on?
Yeah, listen, there's no immediate rematches. That doesn't exist here. What happens is the fight happens. Who knows how this fight plays out? Are both guys healthy? All this other stuff. Don't ever believe that kind of bullshit, because it's not true. Not true.
When it comes to Alex Volkanovski, if he were to become the champion, how big of a deal would it be to sort of have two guys from the region, Australia, New Zealand, holding titles?
Yeah. First of all, I talk about this all the time, how fast it's blown up in Australia as far as fans, talent, the list goes on and on. Beating Max Holloway is a big deal in itself. I mean, Max is one of the best to ever do it. Went on this unbelievable unbeaten streak, tried to move up to 55 and hold two titles at the same time. Beating Max Holloway is a big deal in itself.
Well, speaking of BMFs, I mean, Conor McGregor is making possibly a return January 18th, my birthday, John Kavanagh's birthday. A lot of people are wondering if he beats Donald Cerrone. Is Donald Cerrone looking sort of like the opponent?
Cerrone hasn't even been called. This fight is nowhere near being made. Conor, that was a fight date that we're looking at for Conor. Nothing is done yet. So
do you think
until I announce it, it's not true.
Do you think that he may be in play for the winner of this BMF title? A lot of people thinking the Meg Diaz trilogy.
This fight's a one-off fight.
Because he says he's the BMF. No doubt about it. From Russia right now, he's saying he's the BMF. What do you think about that?
Right. Listen, Conor McGregor is a massive force in the sport, one of the most charismatic, most exciting fighters, one of the most famous fighters ever. The BMF title is happening right here this weekend, and we'll see what's in store for Conor next. But nothing is done. None of that is. We haven't even talked to Cowboy Cerrone.
Do you think if Masvidal is able to win this title, I mean, he's had a meteoric rise in the sport. People saying one of the biggest names in combat sports right now. If Masvidal wins this weekend, do you believe he can be the new biggest star in the UFC?
He's one of them. He's definitely one of them.
I wonder sort of just personally, how crazy of a week has this been compared to some of the past weeks with obviously this Nate Diaz situation and people freaking out that, you know, for a moment there it almost looked like the fight wasn't going to happen.
This is how worried I was. Right
Not at all, not even a little bit.
That much. Thank God we've had a lot of experience with this thing that he tested positive for. Our guys jumped right on it and got all of his stuff tested. Never at any point during this whole thing did I think that Nate Diaz was cheating and taking performance-enhancing drugs, and neither did anybody else. So it was just a matter of figuring out how this happened.
Jeff Nowitzki was sort of speaking to the media today. You know, in hindsight, do you think this is kind of a blessing in disguise that this has sort of happened? Because now, looking forward, USADA's kind of, you know, updated the way that things work, and it'll kind of make it a more streamlined process in the future.
Yeah, Nowitzki and this guy right over here, Hunter, have been all over this thing and really did a great job in figuring out how kids were tested. But if you look at it, it's all the weed smoking kids that are testing positive for this thing and figuring it out with USADA and you know, making sure that people's careers don't get hurt over this that aren't cheating.
Speaking of weed smokers, Nate Diaz back much sooner than we originally thought after UFC 241. Already 244 and he's back here again. Do you imagine if things keep going to plan, we might see more of Nate Diaz, or do you think this could be a situation we might not see him again for the next few years?
Who knows? I stopped trying to figure out the Diaz brothers a long time ago, so who knows? I hope so.
Well, I'll tell you what, it's exciting scenes down here. We can't wait for the big Australian-New Zealand return. We're hearing some rumours at the start of the year for an Auckland card. I don't know if there's any confirmation there, but we're excited to see what happens. And Dana, best of luck this weekend. We can't wait to see who's holding that BMF title.
Appreciate it.
One of the baddest cards the UFC has put together coming down this weekend at Madison Square Garden, UFC 244.